Hi, Taylor again, and this is the second video in our series on CORS. Our first video dealt with a simple CORS example where we allowed all origins, or domains, if you will, to access resources on our server. Next, we're going to do a little bit more complex example where we only allow predetermined domains to access resources. And this is also known as whitelisting, which is a really great way to secure an app and only allow requests from sources you trust. So we can take a look here. And you should know that I've already seeded the database with some tenants. Now, tenants can really be anything. They could be, clients in a multi-tenant system, or they could be outside users consuming your public API, or it can even just be your front end communicating to your back end. So two apps in tandem. It's really common to have your front end um, the first thing to be whitelisted when it talks to your API. And I've already run this, and there's nothing too fancy here. It's just generating some tenants with a predetermined origin, generating an API key, and inserting them in the database, which we can see here. Now, if I go to my Express app, um, I've set up a cache and a function to set that cache. And again, nothing fancy here. It's a basic node cache. We're just asking for that CORS app DB, the collection tenants, and we're finding all the entries. So we're not even really querying. And then we just map over them to create a cache entry. So the key, which is going to be the origin, and the value, which is the API key. And then we set those origins in the cache. Now, if I go all the way back down here, uh, we call that set cache function, wait for it to complete. We're going to list out the origins so we kind of know what we're allowing. And then we're going to start listening for requests. Now I'm going to go back up to the top here. And we're going to be going over two methods of whitelisting CORS, kind of a simpler way and a slightly more complex way. And which one you need is kind of up to you. I kind of tend to go for this first method, which is really just providing a function to the origin property of the CORS options. And we're just going to feed it our cache of keys in the callback. So when a request comes in, the CORS middleware kind of knows what to do. It knows where to find the origin of the request, and it knows to look in this array of origins that we've given it. And we can kind of see this in action here. If I go to my Angular app, and I have two instances of them running. I have one running on localhost 5000, which is in our allowed origins list. And then I have another Angular app running, well, it's the same one, really, just different instance, on the default of port 4200, which is not in our list of allowed origins. So if I click this make request here, I'm going to expect it not to succeed. Yep, I get back this um, 0 unknown error, which, as we know from the first video, typically means that it's a CORS error, and we can kind of confirm that by looking at dev tools. Yep, CORS error, and just like we saw previously, we have the origin, which is 4200, and the host on a different origin. And since we have that whitelist that we're checking, the server isn't going to let this request through. It failed the pre-request check. This is pretty simple and secure way. As long as you know your origins ahead of time. Now, the second more complex way is providing a function with the request. So if we need to check kind of other properties, that's something that's possible. So I'm going to comment out this first method. uncomment second method so we can kind of see it a little bit better. So essentially what we're doing is we have a function, and the request is the first parameter, and then the callback, which is the same thing from the first method. And we also have to understand that this is getting called with the options method. So what we get here with the request is a little bit more limited than what you might be used to seeing. It's not going to have the full set of headers. For instance, if you're setting an auth header, it might not come through. You'll be able to see that the auth header is present, but not really the value. But outside of that, we kind of have like a situation where maybe they're passing a API key in through a query param. So we're gonna check for that. So we can just step through this here. So we're gonna get the origin from the request header. Then we're going to check and see if we have a key that matches our origin in the cache. And then if that origin exists, we're going to check the query param for the API key and see if that matches the cache value. So again, looking at our set cache function, when we set the cache, we give it the key, which is the origin, and the value, which is the API key. So if we get a dual match there, then we'll allow the request to go through. CORS is enabled. Otherwise, by default, CORS is not enabled. Okay, so we can see that in action here. Let me just make sure this actually restarted. Yep, okay, perfect. So I'm going to go back to my Angular app in Visual Studio Code, though, and we can see that we're making the request, but we're not including that API key, which I have kind of stored up here. So initially, I'm going to expect this to fail, even though we're on port 5000, which is a allowed origin. Since we're not passing that API key, it should fail, which it does. Now, if I go back to that Angular app and copy this here, save that. Looks like it rebuilt. Okay. Now, if I click make request again, it succeeds. Booyah. All right. So those are two more examples of how you might whitelist some allowed origins, which would greatly step up the security of your Express app or any other app that's built on Express. And most other server frameworks have easy ways to accomplish that too. In IIS or Internet Information Services for Microsoft, there's a ton of ways you can accomplish that. I've seen it done in Go and Python. It's a really common way to make sure your app is secure. Okay, thanks again for watching. Be well.